Now, the not so good news. It's a story that enough people are not talking about in Canada. I have been talking about it myself a little bit, but not as much. Not as much as I, not that I would like to, but there's not very much to talk about because it too, if it's not under an overt publication ban, it's very difficult to get any information on it. Now, the hold on, I want to shout out the person who is raising awareness about it and talk about it. Jason Levine, Lavigene, like Avril Lavigne, independent journalist. His Twitter feed is, his Rumble feed is, independent journalist on Rumble, 536 followers, and he has done a number of podcasts talking about this. Jason Levine, his Twitter handle is @JasonLevineMP. What's MP stand for? Hold on 1 second. Member of Parliament. Countering government overreach, firmly against the globalist agenda, independent candidate for MP, Yellowhead, Alberta bearing witness. He's been talking about it. But Newsweek, this is a big amplification, a signal boost of sorts of the political prisoners that are currently still being held in Canada. In jail, pre-trial detention, the Coutts 4. Many of you might not have heard about it, but if you've been watching the channel for long enough, you know about it. Jeremy McKenzie and I talked about it during at least one, if not several of our live streams. Justin Trudeau's political prisoners, opinion. Gord McGill trucker. Listen to this. It's been 18 months since Canada's Freedom Convoy rocked the whirlwind. Truckers from all corners of Canada descended on Ottawa to protest Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's vindictive and punishing vaccine mandates. Okay, we're going to just read it quick. While the convoy was still hundreds of kilometers from Ottawa, Trudeau's public safety minister, liar Marco Mendicino, was planning a media campaign deploying a similar message to the one used in response to the January 6 attacks on Washington, D.C. Remember what I said, people. Trudeau so wanted the violence so that he could invoke the Emergencies Act. He never got it, but he invoked the Emergencies Act anyhow. Had he gotten it, the public opinion of those who support the truckers could have been swayed to say, look at the violence. He had no choice. The reason why the trucker convoy was so internationally embarrassing for Justin Trudeau and wildly effective was because of the absolute absence of violence. And the reason why January 6th has been facilitated to be weaponized was because of the presence of some violence, pocketed violence, and I will dare say, quoting Darren Beattie's Fedsurrection, instigated violence, but set that aside. The Freedom Convoy did not deliver any of the manufactured concerns. In the 3 weeks of the protest, not a single act of violence was committed. You all know this. We're going to skip over this. Against such revelry, Trudeau invoked the Emergency Act. Fine. Let's just see. We got to get to the Coutts 4. The invocation brought an end to the protests and launched a Kafkaesque nightmare for many who were involved. Bank accounts were seized. Tamara Lich was arrested, still facing... I'm going to get an interview with Tamara Lich, by the way. Stay tuned. Counseling mischief, and 4 others. This is what people do not know. 4 others. Chris Lysak, Chris Carbett, Anthony Tony Oliadic, and Jerry Morin have been held without a trial and without bail for charges related to, quote, conspiracy to commit murder against Canadian police officer at the Coutts, Alberta border crossing. I happen to think that these charges are bunk. I happen to think that these charges are an outright fabrication, if for no other reason than I know how much the other charges were an outright fabrication. Incitement to mischief for Tamara Lich, incitement to mischief and obstruction for Pat King. I know that those charges were politically motivated bullshit. And so I'm going to learn from past experience. That's redundant. I'm going to learn from my experience to operate on the starting premise that these charges are also probably bullshit. I don't know better. They might be legitimate. And even if they were legitimate, you remember that dude who tried to murder 4 protesters by running them over with his car? He got bail. Still in jail. Pre-trial detention with no bail. That's not just not Canadian. That's, I dare say, communist China, North Korean. You want to talk about autocrats and Putin and locking up journalists, Trudeau? That's what you got here. 4 guys are still in pretrial detention, haven't had a trial yet. Screw your speedy trial. You know, only pedophiles in the East Coast get off for charter violations, so they don't have a trial fast enough. Look it up if you think I'm joking. The pedophiles get off. These 4 guys are still in jail. Pretrial detention, no bail, haven't had a trial yet, and it's near 18 months later. These are serious charges which should imply serious evidence presented in an expeditious trial. Yet at the time of writing, it has been 515 days since these men were arrested, and no trial has yet taken place. Scream loud as hell for the world to hear. You know, this I can appreciate might not have the international interest of the vaccine mandate stuff in, you know, for the United States far-right podcasters, you know, like the Jimmy Dores, the Glenn Greenwalds. This should be of international interest regardless. What happens in Canada trickles down to America. Worse, the evidence on offer is vague and ambiguous. Text messages, testimony from 2 undercover RCMP officers working the crowd at the Coutts protest site, and a widely circulated photo of allegedly confiscated weapons that provided the main justification for the invocation of the Emergencies Act. Remember that picture? It's got a Diagolon patch on one of them. Oh my goodness. Whatever the charges against him, the denial of bail is an egregious departure from the norm and has been given no explanation. As Donald Best, a former detective and 15-year veteran of the Toronto Police Services, pointed out, everybody gets bail in Canada, including a suspect of the accused first-degree murder of a Toronto police officer and, somewhat ironically, the member of the Antifa guy who drove his Jeep into Freedom Convoy protest site in Winnipeg, Manitoba, injuring 4 people. We're going through the whole thing. No bail for the Coutts 4. Pre-trial hearing was on January 29th, and another isn't scheduled until July 25th, where it's believed the actual trial will be set for sometime in 2024. That's not this year. It's still 2023. These are political prisoners, pure and simple. They are being denied basic rights due to even the most violent of criminals because they are on the wrong side of the Trudeau government. They are being used as a fig leaf, the last shred of Trudeau's legitimacy for invoking the Emergencies Act and the massive overreach of freezing bank accounts and seizing assets. How far down? This goes on for quite a bit. Let's just do this quickly. As Jason Levine, an independent journalist in Western Alberta, put it, there is an inverted house of cards Trudeau, Mendicino, Rouleau, all of these people have built, and at the bottom are the Coutts 4. If these men are exonerated, Canadians will start demanding answers about a whole lot of other things. From your mouth to God's ears, McGill, I don't think you're right. I've come back to Canada. I've seen it firsthand. Fingers and ears, just give me my nice, peaceful life and I'll be happy. Using protesters as captives as examples is nothing new in the long history of government. But places like Canada and the United States, leaders like Justin Trudeau and President Joe Biden love to invoke freedom and transparency ad nauseum and publicly hector the leaders of other countries over their treatment of dissidents. Yep, it's a great article. The Coutts 4 are the last of Trudeau's political enemies, whom he can punish with impunity. They have no power, and they have the full weight of the state against them. If his government can allow murderers and terrorists out on bail, he paid them off. $10 million to a convicted, bad man. $10 million. They should extend the same to the men from Coutts and get on with the trial. Canada ought not be a nation where the works of Kafka and Camus play out daily. And Orwell. Don't forget Orwell. We don't yet know if these men are innocent or guilty of the charges against them, but it flies in the face of justice that they have not yet faced trial and have been denied bail. Locking people up for extended periods like this without a trial is the stuff of banana republics. Gordon McGill is a trucker, a writer, a commentator, and can be found at www.autonomoustruckers.substack.com. I'm going to give everybody the link to this. Please blast it around and scream it as loud as possible.